$13,000 for a stranger's father and $2 for me. That's the exchange rate my own daughter set on 34 years of fatherhood, and she didn't even blink when she handed it over. My name is Samuel Henderson. I'm 65 years old. I spent 31 years delivering and then supervising mail routes for the United States Postal Service in Queens, and until the Thanksgiving I'm about to tell you about, I thought I knew exactly where I stood with my own family. Looking back now, I was about to find out I'd been ranked. And not very high. Welcome back to Dad's Sweet Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, every villain in these stories thought they were the smartest person in the room. They were not. Subscribe so you never miss a story. Let me back up because you need to understand the players before I show you the board. My wife is Charlotte, 63 years old, spent 38 years as a labor and delivery nurse at a hospital in Flushing. Retired now, and the only person on this earth who has never once made me feel small. We raised 2 daughters in a 2-bedroom co-op in Queens on a mail carrier's salary and a nurse's overtime, and we did it without ever once telling either of our girls they were a burden. Our older daughter is Lydia, 34 years old, sharp as a tack, works in corporate communications for a financial firm in Manhattan, and married 4 years ago to a man named Ellis, an investment banker. Tall, expensive haircut, the kind of handshake that's a little too firm because somebody taught him that's what confidence looks like. Ellis's father is a real estate developer named Montgomery, 68 years old, owns buildings, golfs at clubs that have waiting lists, and has the specific personality of a man who has never once in his life been told no by someone he didn't immediately stop inviting to dinner. Our younger daughter is Rita, 31 years old, a third-grade teacher in the Bronx, married to a contractor, 2 kids under 5, a walk-up apartment with a window unit that rattles, and a heart that has never once calculated what anything is worth before giving it. I'm telling you about Rita now because you're going to need her later. Remember her. I want to give you one memory each of these 2 girls, because it tells you everything you need to know about how they turned out the way they did. Lydia was 11 the first time she asked me point blank what I made an hour. We were in the car, some errand or another, and out of nowhere she said, "Dad, how much money do you make?" I told her because I didn't believe in lying to my kids about that kind of thing. She went quiet for a minute and then said, "Tracy's dad is a lawyer. He makes way more than that." I laughed it off at the time. Kids say things, you don't read too much into it. Looking back now, I think that might have been the exact moment she started keeping a ledger nobody else knew existed. Rita, around the same age, came home from a friend's birthday party where the family had hired a petting zoo, an actual petting zoo, in their backyard in Bayside. I braced myself for the comparison. Instead, she flopped onto the couch and said, "That was so much fun, but I missed our house. Can we get pizza and watch a movie?" That was Rita's whole personality in one sentence, and it never changed in 20 years. For 4 years, ever since Lydia married into the Montgomery family, I watched my daughter do something I didn't have a word for yet. She'd correct herself mid-sentence, at dinner, start to say my dad, and switch to my father. Like the second one sounded more like something you'd say in the lobby of a building with a doorman. She started saying "we summer" instead of "we go in the summer." She laughed at things Montgomery said that weren't funny, the kind of laugh that's really just a small bow. Charlotte saw it before I did. She always does. I remember one dinner in particular, maybe a year and a half into the marriage, at a restaurant Montgomery picked with no prices on the menu, which should tell you everything you need to know about the kind of restaurant it was. Montgomery had been talking for 20 minutes about a deal he'd closed on a building in Tribeca, and at some point he turned to me, almost as an afterthought, the way you turn to acknowledge a waiter refilling your water. "And Samuel, what is it you did again, before you retired?" "Postal Service," I said. 31 years. Montgomery said, already turning back to Ellis. "Good honest work, I'm sure." Good honest work, I'm sure. 4 words that managed to compliment and dismiss me in the exact same breath, the way you'd describe a hardware store you'd never actually shop in. I watched Lydia's face when he said it. She laughed, not at me exactly, but at something. Some current in the room that told her laughing was the correct response. The same way she'd laugh 4 years later handing me a $2 ticket. I didn't say anything that night either. I'm not always proud of how good I got at not saying anything. "She's performing for them," Charlotte said one night, scraping plates after a dinner where Lydia had spent 40 minutes asking Montgomery about his boat. "She thinks if she stops, they'll notice we're not them." "We're not them," I said. "I know that. I'm asking if you know it bothers you." It did. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. Thanksgiving landed at Lydia and Ellis's apartment that year. A corner unit in a building with a name instead of an address. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A kitchen island the size of my first car. Charlotte and I brought a green bean casserole and foil, because that's what we do, and Montgomery brought a bottle of wine that cost more than my casserole dish. Dinner was fine. Dinner is always fine. It's dessert where things go sideways. Lydia stood up with 2 gift bags, the kind with ribbon handles and tissue paper fanned out like she'd practiced it, and the whole table went quiet the way tables do when somebody's about to make an announcement. "Okay, so," Lydia said, glowing, "I wanted to do something special this year, for the 2 most important men in my life." Ellis grinned like he already knew. Montgomery folded his hands like a man accepting a trophy he'd been expecting. She handed Montgomery the first bag. He pulled out a folder. Heavy cardstock, gold foil lettering, the kind of folder a cruise line uses when it wants you to feel like you've already boarded. Mediterranean. 14 nights, a suite with a private balcony. "Lydia," Montgomery said, pressing a hand to his chest like he'd been shot. "This is $13,000. This is—" "You deserve it," Lydia said. "You've done so much for us." He hugged her. He actually got a little misty, this man who owns 4 buildings and a boat, misty over a cruise ticket, while my daughter beamed at him like she'd just paid off a debt she felt deeply personally responsible for. Then she turned to me. "And for you, Dad, I want you to look at how she did this. I got you something fun." She handed me a small bag. Tissue paper, same ribbon. I reached in and pulled out a scratch-off lottery ticket, $2, the kind they sell next to the gum at the deli register. "I just thought it'd be funny," she said, already laughing a little. "You know, since you're always saying you'd retire early if you hit the lotto." I held it. I looked at it. I looked at her. Nobody said anything for what felt like a very long time, and then Ellis, bless him truly, the man has the timing of a foghorn, said, "Hey, maybe it's the big one," and laughed like he'd just diffused a bomb with a joke. Charlotte's hand found my knee under the table. A squeeze. "Steady, Samuel." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, because what else do you say? "That's very thoughtful." I tucked the ticket in my shirt pocket and ate my pie. What I couldn't see then was that this $2 piece of cardboard was about to become the most expensive thing anyone in that room had ever given away. We didn't talk about it on the subway ride home. Charlotte stared out the window of the train car, jaw tight, and I held the rail and thought about over 3 decades. I thought about teaching Lydia to ride a bike in the parking lot of the church on 108th, running behind her with my hand on the seat until my back gave out and I let go and she didn't even notice for half a block. I thought about working a double shift to pay for her braces. I thought about driving 2.5 hours each way to move her into her dorm, and then driving back the same night because I had a route at 5 a.m. I thought about the word important, the 2 most important men in my life, and where exactly a lifetime of being her father had landed me on that list. "You're quiet," Charlotte said once we were home, coats off, kettle on. "I'm doing math," I said. "What kind of math?" "The kind where I add up every Christmas, every tuition check, every 3 a.m. phone call when she locked herself out of her apartment in the rain, and I divide it by a $2 scratch-off, and I try to figure out what the answer's supposed to tell me." Charlotte set 2 mugs down. "What's it telling you?" "That I'm a punchline now. Apparently I have been for a while, and I'm the last to find out." "Don't," Charlotte said sharp. "Don't let her make you small in your own kitchen. She doesn't get that." I didn't say anything. I just took the ticket out of my shirt pocket, set it on the counter next to the sugar bowl, and went to bed. That ticket was going to sit there for 3 more days before I did a single thing about it, and those 3 days were going to feel like the longest wait of my entire life. Not because I suspected anything, but because some quiet, stubborn part of me didn't even want to give it the satisfaction of being scratched. It was Charlotte who finally pushed it across the counter at me on Sunday morning, coffee in hand, reading glasses pushed up into her hair. "Scratch the thing, Samuel. It's been staring at me for 3 days like a dare. It's a $2 joke. It's a $2 joke that's making you act like somebody died. Scratch it, throw it out, and let's move on with our lives." So I did. Right there at the kitchen table, with a penny, the way you're supposed to, half listening to the radio, fully expecting nothing. 5 numbers. Then a 6th. I sat very still. "Samuel?" I didn't answer. I was doing the math again. Except this time, the math wasn't measuring how little I mattered. It was measuring something with 8 zeros in it, and my hands had started shaking in a way that had nothing to do with being 65. "Samuel, you're scaring me." "Charlotte," I said, very slowly, the way you talk when you're not sure your own voice is going to hold. Get the magnifying glass off the junk drawer. I need you to look at this with me before I say a number out loud, because if I say it out loud and I'm wrong, I think I might have a heart attack. She got the magnifying glass. She looked again. She set it down on the counter and put both hands flat on either side of it, like it might try to get up and walk away. That's not Samuel. That's not a real number. Check it again. I've checked it 4 times. Check it a 5th time. She did. Her voice came out small. $120 million. I want to tell you I felt joy. I didn't. Not yet. What I felt sitting in my own kitchen with a $2 ticket worth more than every building Montgomery owned combined was something closer to a held breath. Because the first thought in my head, the very first thought, before the disbelief, before the math, before any of it, was Lydia's voice, laughing. I just thought it'd be funny. From that moment on, I was going to make sure it was the most expensive joke in the history of our family. The first person outside that kitchen I had to look in the eye was Nora, who runs the corner store 2 blocks from us, the one with the faded awning and the lottery machine wedged between the lighters and the gum. I've bought my coffee from Nora every single morning for almost 15 years. She knows how I take it before I ask. I walked in that Sunday afternoon on legs that didn't feel entirely like mine, needing milk, needing to do something normal with my hands, and Nora took one look at my face and set the coffee down without me asking. Samuel, you look like you saw a ghost. I'm fine, Nora. You're not fine. You're gray. Sit down before you fall down. I can't tell you, I said. It was, looking back, possibly the worst thing you can say to a woman who has spent 15 years learning to read your face like a weather report. I want to. I really, really want to, but I can't. Nora narrowed her eyes at me the way she does when a customer tries to pay for a 40-cent newspaper with a $100 bill. Did somebody die? No. Are you sick? No. Then whatever it is, it can wait until you can talk. But Samuel, you come back in here lying to me again with that face. I'm calling Charlotte myself. I laughed for the first time since Thursday. It felt strange in my chest, like a muscle I'd forgotten I had. I didn't tell her, not that day. But she belongs in this story, because 3 weeks later, when the news finally did break wide open and made the local paper, Nora called the apartment. The first thing she said, before congratulations, before anything, was, "You bought that ticket from your daughter, not from me. I want that on the record. People are going to ask, and I want it on the record that I am an honest woman who sells $2 tickets and doesn't even get a thank you card." That's Nora. She got one anyway, framed hanging behind her register to this day. We didn't tell anyone that day. Not Lydia, not Rita, not Montgomery, not the mailman. Nobody. Charlotte and I sat at that kitchen table for 2 hours doing the thing you do when something enormous lands on you. Going quiet, then talking too fast, then quiet again. "We need a lawyer before we breathe a word of this to a single soul," Charlotte said. "I mean it, Samuel. Not a friend, not family. A lawyer." There was exactly one person I trusted with something this size, and that was Harrison. Harrison and I went back to the post office. He'd worked the counter 2 stations down from me for 9 years before he went back to school at 35, got his law degree, and built a quiet little estate and trust practice out of an office above a pharmacy in Bayside. He'd done our will 15 years ago for the price of a case of beer and a promise of free help moving a couch. He was 66 now, silver-haired, the kind of lawyer who still answers his own phone. I called him Sunday night. He picked up on the second ring. "Henderson, it's 9 o'clock on a Sunday. This better be good. Harrison, I need you to sit down." "I'm sitting." "I need you to sit down somewhere you can't drop anything breakable." There was a pause, then carefully. "Samuel, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything. I won $120 million. Dead silence on the line. Then, "I'm going to need you to say that again, slower, like I'm an idiot." I said it again, slower, like he was an idiot. He didn't laugh once. By the time I hung up, he had a plan, a list of 3 things I was not allowed to do under any circumstances. Sign the back of the ticket in public, post anything on social media, or tell my daughters before he'd seen the actual paperwork, and an appointment for 9 the next morning. The wheels turned quietly behind that closed office door above a pharmacy in Bayside, while for nearly 3 weeks I said absolutely nothing to Lydia. The claim process for a prize that size is not what you think it is from the commercials. There's no confetti. There's a small windowless conference room in a state office building, a notary, A woman from the lottery commission with a binder thicker than my old route manual, and a lot of sitting in chairs that don't recline while people who specialize in not reacting to anything ask you the same 5 questions 4 different ways to make sure you understand what's about to happen to your life. Lump sum or annuity, the woman from the commission said, sliding a sheet across the table like she was dealing cards. Most people think they want the annuity until they do the math. What's the math? Charlotte asked. The annuity pays out over 30 years. The lump sum is available now, today, minus the immediate tax withholding. Some people prefer the annuity for discipline reasons. It protects you from yourself, frankly. Spending it all in 5 years, bad investments, family asking for help. I felt Charlotte's hand find mine under the table at that last part. Family asking for help. The woman had no idea how close to the bone she'd just cut, and not in the direction she meant. We have a financial advisor, Harrison said, before I could answer for both of us. We're not deciding anything in this room today that we haven't already decided upstairs. Upstairs in Harrison's office was where the real conversation happened. A financial advisor named Patricia, brought in specifically because Harrison trusted her, and she'd never once, in 20 years, leaked a client's business to a soul. She laid out trust structures on a whiteboard like she was diagramming a football play, talked about generation-skipping provisions and spendthrift clauses, words I'd never had a reason to learn in 31 years of sorting mail. A spendthrift clause, Patricia explained, means whoever you name as beneficiary can't be pressured, sued, or talked into signing the money away to somebody else. It protects the money from the world. It can also, and here she looked at me carefully, like she already understood more about my family than I'd told her, protect the money from people inside the family who might come asking, later, once word gets out. Good, I said. Build that in. Build in every wall you've got. We took the lump sum. After taxes, what landed in the trust Harrison set up for us was just under $68 million. I'm going to be honest with you. For about 4 days, my plan was to tell no one and just quietly enjoy it. Pay off Rita's mortgage, maybe? Take Charlotte somewhere with water that's actually blue? Forget the whole lottery ticket business ever happened? It was Charlotte, of all people, who talked me out of letting it go quietly. You can be the bigger person and still not be a doormat, Samuel, she said one night, the two of us at the kitchen table with Harrison's folder of documents between us like a battle map. She didn't give you that ticket as a joke between equals. She gave it to you because somewhere along the way, she decided you were the punchline in this family, and Montgomery was the headline. If you just quietly fix everyone's lives and never say a word about it, she never has to look at what she did, and she'll do it again. To you, to us, to anybody she decides doesn't rate. So what do you want me to do? I want you to let her see it. All of it. The cruise, the scratch-off, the laugh, and then the number. I want her to sit in a room and understand exactly what she threw away for a $13,000 boat ticket to a man who isn't even her father. I looked at Harrison. Harrison, who had spent 30 years drafting wills for people who'd been disappointed by their children, didn't even look up from his legal pad. For what it's worth, he said, I've redone 20 years of wills for people who got blindsided by exactly this kind of thing. And the ones who waited and did it quietly always regretted it. The ones who did it with the lights on never did. That was the moment the lesson stopped being a feeling and started being a plan. Here's what we built. Over 3 weeks, in that office above the pharmacy, with Charlotte at my side every single session. First, a new will and a new irrevocable trust, replacing the old one Harrison had drafted 15 years ago, that split everything evenly between Lydia and Rita. The new documents named Rita as primary beneficiary of the entire estate, full stop. Lydia's name was removed entirely, not reduced, not given a token symbolic dollar the way people do in movies to make a point. Removed. Harrison was very clear that a token dollar just gives lawyers something to fight over later. Clean removal leaves nothing to contest. Second, a separate trust, funded immediately rather than after anyone's death, that paid off Rita's mortgage outright, funded a real college account for her 2 kids, and gave her and her husband enough breathing room that neither of them would ever again have to choose between rent and a car repair. Rita didn't know about any of this yet. That part comes later, and it's the part that made me cry, not the revenge part. Revenge was never going to be the only thing this money was for. Third, and this was Charlotte's idea, and it was vicious in exactly the right way, we did nothing publicly about the money for 3 more weeks. Nothing. We let Lydia keep thinking her father was a 65-year-old retired mail carrier, living on a pension. And we let her keep telling stories at dinner parties, we found out later, about her thoughtful little joke gift, the scratch-off ticket. Ha ha, isn't my dad a good sport? While we sat quietly on $68 million, Lydia was out there at some other family's dinner table, mid-laugh, telling that story like it cost her nothing. It was about to cost her everything. We planned the reveal for Christmas. Charlotte's idea, and I want to be clear, I did not have to talk her into a single part of it. It has to be in front of Montgomery, she said. If it's just us, she'll cry, you'll feel bad, and the lesson dies in the room. It has to be loud enough that she can't talk her way out of it later and rewrite the story to her friends. I called Lydia myself 2 weeks before Christmas and told her Charlotte and I wanted to host this year, our place, small as it is, instead of her glass-walled apartment in the sky. I told her we'd had some good news we wanted to share with the whole family. I told her to invite Ellis and Montgomery both. I did not tell her what the news was. Oh, what kind of good news, she said. That same bright performing voice she used on Montgomery. You'll see, sweetheart, I said. Wear something you don't mind getting emotional in. Christmas dinner in our two-bedroom co-op in Queens was about to be the most expensive $13,000 boat ticket anyone in that family ever paid for. Christmas morning, our apartment was full in a way it hadn't been in years. Rita and her husband and the two kids took up most of the living room floor with wrapping paper. Lydia arrived in a coat that cost more than my first car, Ellis behind her carrying a bottle of something, and Montgomery came last in a cashmere scarf, looking around our apartment the way you look at a museum exhibit about a way of life you've heard described but never actually witnessed. Samuel, Montgomery said, shaking my hand with that too firm grip, cozy place you have here. It's paid off, I said. That's all it needs to be. Of course, Montgomery said, glancing at the bookshelf Charlotte's father had built 60 years ago, like he wasn't sure whether it was furniture or an artifact. Character. Real character. You don't get this in the new buildings. No, I agreed. You don't. Charlotte caught my eye over the kitchen counter. Not yet, that look said. Let them eat first. Lydia hovered near me in the kitchen while Charlotte basted the turkey, the way she used to hover when she was small and wanted something but hadn't worked up the nerve to ask for it directly. So, she said, too casual, you said good news on the phone. Is it about the apartment? Are you guys finally selling and moving somewhere warm? You'll see, I said. Dad, come on, you can't just dangle that and walk away. I can, I said. Watch me. I went back to carving, and if my hands were steadier than they had any business being for a man about to detonate his own family at the dinner table, that's only because Charlotte had made me practice the speech twice in the bathroom mirror that morning, like a man preparing for a deposition instead of a holiday. Dinner was loud and normal in the way family dinners are. Rita's kids spilling juice, Ellis talking about a deal at work nobody else cared about, Montgomery telling a story about his boat that he had, I am quite sure told at our Thanksgiving table word for word. Lydia kept glancing at me through the meal, curious. You could see her turning the phrase good news over and over, probably guessing at a vacation, maybe a small inheritance from some great aunt, anything but the truth. I waited until dessert. Charlotte had made the same pie she always makes, and when the plates were down and the table had gone quiet for that brief window between eating and clearing, I stood up. I want to thank you all for coming, I said, and I want to follow up on something from Thanksgiving, actually. Lydia smiled, easy, no idea. Oh yeah? That scratch-off ticket you gave me, the $2 one, the funny one. Oh my God, yes, Lydia laughed, glancing at Montgomery like she was inviting him in on the joke again. Did you finally scratch it? I did, I said, eventually. And I reached into my jacket pocket and set a folder on the table. Not the scratch-off, a different folder, cream-colored, with Harrison's firm letterhead on it, the kind of folder that means business in a way tissue paper and ribbon never could. Eventually, I said I won $120 million. Nobody breathed for a second. The silence in that room was louder than anything I'd ever heard. What? Lydia said. $120 million. I said again. Pre-tax. We took it as a lump sum. After taxes, it's just under 68. Ellis actually stood halfway up out of his chair, like his body needed to be vertical to process it, then sat back down. Montgomery's fork was still in his hand, frozen halfway to a plate he was no longer looking at. Dad, Lydia said, and her voice had gone thin. Are you joking? Is this a joke gift? No, I said. I don't do those anymore. Turns out they're expensive. Here's where the room split. It was the exact moment Charlotte and I had pictured for 3 weeks straight. Montgomery recovered first. Of course he did. The man spent 40 years recovering from worse silences than this one at negotiating tables. He set his fork down, dabbed his mouth, and said with the smoothness of a man rerouting a deal that had just gone sideways, "Well, Samuel, that's congratulations. That's extraordinary news. Truly, we're thrilled for you and Charlotte." "Thank you," I said. "I want to be clear, Montgomery. This isn't a celebration dinner for you. You're here for a different reason. I'll get to it." The smoothness cracked, just slightly at the corners. Lydia had gone very pale, doing the same math I'd done at that kitchen table 3 weeks earlier, except her math was running in the opposite direction, and you could watch it happen on her face in real time. The scratch-off ticket, the joke, the laugh, "Isn't my dad a good sport?" replaying itself behind her eyes with a number attached to it now that made every second of it look different. "Dad," she said very quietly, "I didn't know. I swear to you I had no idea. It was just supposed to be funny. I never would have." "I know you didn't know," I said. "That's not actually the problem, sweetheart." "Then what is?" "The problem," I said, "is that you didn't need to know the ticket was worth anything to decide I was worth $2. You decided that on your own with no jackpot involved at all. Montgomery got $13,000. I got a gas station scratch-off and a joke about how I'm always saying I'd retire if I hit the lotto, which, by the way, I have said exactly twice in my life, both times as a joke, the same way the gift was supposedly a joke. Funny how the joke landed exactly where it was always going to land. "That's not Dad. That's not fair. I didn't mean—" "I let you finish at Thanksgiving," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected, steady the way it gets right before the short sentences start. "Let me finish now." The room went completely breathless. Rita had gone still, her hand over her mouth. Her husband had a hand on her back. The kids had been shuffled somehow, by some instinct of Charlotte's, into the other room with a tablet, and I was grateful for that, because what came next wasn't for them. "I have spent 34 years, I said, making sure you never once felt like a burden. I worked doubles for your braces. I drove 4.5 hours round trip the night you moved into your dorm because I had a route at 5 a.m., and I didn't care. I have never, one single time in your entire life, made you feel like you had to earn my love with a gift, a title, or a number in a bank account. Dad, please. I'm not finished." She stopped. The room stayed dead silent. Short sentences now. "You gave a man you've known for 4 years $13,000 gift wrapped with a speech. You gave your own father a $2 joke with a laugh. I want you to sit with that. Not with my money, with that." Montgomery, to his credit or his detriment, depending how you want to read it, decided this was the moment to insert himself. "Samuel, I think we should keep some perspective here," he said, that boardroom smoothness sliding back into place. "It was a gift between a daughter-in-law and a father-in-law. It doesn't need to be weighed against." "Montgomery," I said, "you're not actually part of this conversation. You're part of the lesson." His face did something complicated. "I'm sorry?" "For 4 years," I said, "you have sat at tables with me and talked over me, around me, past me, like a man who delivered mail his whole life couldn't possibly have anything worth listening to. You've never once asked me a question about my own life that wasn't a setup for a story about yours. I've watched my daughter shrink herself smaller every time she's in your orbit, correcting her own sentences so she sounds more like you and less like the house she grew up in. So no, this isn't only about a cruise ticket. It's about who in this family got treated like he mattered and who got handed a joke." Nobody at that table said a word. Ellis was staring at his own hands like they belonged to a stranger. Lydia was crying now, quietly, the kind of crying where you're trying very hard not to make a sound and failing. "Dad," she finally managed, What do you want me to do? Tell me what you want and I'll do it. I'll pay you back. I don't want anything from you," I said. "That's the part you haven't understood yet. I already did something." I opened the folder. "This is my new will and trust finalized 3 weeks ago. I want to read you one line from it, and then I'm going to stop talking, and you're going to have to live with it." I found the page. I'd practiced this part more than any other, because I wanted my voice level when I said it. "I, Samuel Henderson, being of sound mind, hereby designate my daughter, Rita Henderson, as sole beneficiary of my entire estate, in full, with no provision made for my daughter Lydia." I closed the folder. The sound Lydia made then, a person hearing for the first time in her life that there was a door in her family that could actually close. You're cutting me out? Completely?" "Completely," I said. "Not a token dollar. Not a someday she'll come around. Completely, the way you completely handed Montgomery a $13,000 gift and me a $2 one. I'm not punishing you for losing money, Lydia. I'm telling you what happens when you spend 34 years of someone's love like it's worth less than a boat ticket. Eventually, they do the math too. Rita hadn't said a word through any of this. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaking. Dad, I didn't. Please don't do this because of me. I never asked for. You didn't ask for anything, I said, and my voice changed completely here, gentled, because this part wasn't the lesson. This part was just love. That's exactly why it's yours. You've never once in your entire life made me feel like I had to be worth something to be your father. You showed up to every visit with nothing but yourself, and somehow that was always enough. So it's yours. The mortgage on your apartment is already paid off, by the way. Has been for 2 weeks. Your kids have college accounts now. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to find out the same week your sister found out what she lost. Rita was sobbing now, the good kind, her husband's arm around her, and Charlotte had come around the table to put a hand on her shoulder, and for 1 second the whole horrible weight of the evening cracked open into something that actually looked like the family I'd always wanted, sitting right there at the same table as the family that had let me down. Lydia watched all of it, every second. I made sure she did. Ellis finally found his voice, and it came out smaller than I expected from a man who negotiates for a living. Mr. Henderson, he said, I want you to know I had no idea about any of this. The gift, I mean. Lydia told me what she was getting everyone, and I didn't. I should have said something. I should have noticed. You should have, I agreed, but you didn't. Because in your world, a $13,000 boat ticket for your own father and a $2 joke for hers probably didn't even register as strange. That's the world your wife's been trying to fit into for 4 years. I hope it was worth it to her. Montgomery stood up, finally, smoothing his jacket, the way men like that stand up when a room stops being theirs to run. I think, he said, given the tone this has taken, perhaps Ellis and I should— Sit down, Montgomery, I said, and something in my voice made him actually do it, which surprised both of us. You're not leaving yet either. I have one more thing to say, and it's for you. He sat, stiff, affronted, a man unaccustomed to being told what to do in a room he hadn't built. You've spent 4 years, I said, treating me like the help at my own daughter's table. I want you to know that the next time you're on that cruise ship, the one my $2 apparently couldn't compete with, I'd like you to think about where the $13,000 actually came from. Because it came from a family that needed every cent it had, and it went to a man who didn't need a single dollar of it, who took it anyway, smiling, while my daughter's own father held a gas station scratch-off in his hand and said, "Thank you, sweetheart," because that's what good fathers do, even when it cost them something. You took something you didn't need from people who needed it. Sit with that the way you're asking Lydia to sit with anything tonight. He didn't have a smooth answer for that one. For the first time all night, Montgomery had nothing to say. Lydia tried one more time, after Montgomery and Ellis had gone quiet, after the table had settled into the kind of silence that only happens after something irreversible has been said out loud. "Dad," she whispered, "is there anything? Is there any way to undo this? I'll do anything. I'll apologize to you every single day for the rest of my life if you just—" "No," I said. Just that. One word. I had pictured 100 different versions of this conversation over those 3 weeks, and in some of them, I softened. In some of them, there was a version of me that said, "We'll see," or "Give it time," or "Let's talk in the new year." That version of me didn't survive Christmas dinner. "Dad, please, I'm your daughter." "You were always my daughter," I said. That was never in question. What was in question was whether I was your father or just a line item you'd gotten comfortable underfunding. You answered that question yourself in front of everyone with a ribbon on it. I'm just the one who finally read the receipt out loud. She didn't have anything left to say to that. Charlotte didn't either, but Charlotte's silence was the satisfied kind. She reached over and took my hand under the table, the same way she had after the scratch-off, except this time the squeeze meant something completely different. Not steady, Samuel, just good. I'm not going to pretend the months after that were easy, or clean, or that there was some triumphant final scene where I felt nothing but vindication. Revenge, even the well-deserved kind, doesn't arrive and then politely leave. It moves in. Lydia called for 2 weeks straight. Texts, voicemails, one letter that Charlotte found in the mailbox and handed to me without opening, which I appreciated, because I didn't open it either. Not out of cruelty, out of knowing myself well enough to know that if I read it, I'd start finding reasons to undo something that had taken over 3 decades to finally need doing. Ellis reached out once separately in February. A careful, lawyerly email asking if there was a path forward for reconciliation, given the circumstances. Harrison drafted the reply. It was 3 sentences long. It said, in essence, that the trust was irrevocable, the decision was final, and that any future correspondence should go through counsel. I signed it without changing a word. Montgomery, as far as I know, took his cruise. 14 nights, Mediterranean, private balcony. I hope the weather was bad. Rita came over for dinner almost every Sunday after that, the way she always had, except now there was a different ease to it. Not because of the money, she made that clear more than once, sitting at our table with her kids underfoot, telling me she'd have come over for free pot roast and bad television reruns, whether there'd been $68 million or 68 cents in any account anywhere. I believed her. That's the whole reason the money went to her in the first place. Charlotte and I took the trip we'd always said we'd take someday. Not a cruise. We'd had enough of cruises as a concept by then. 2 weeks in a small town on the coast of Portugal. Water bluer than anything in any brochure Montgomery ever waved around a dinner table. We sat on a balcony every night with cheap wine and didn't talk about Lydia at all, which felt, after a lifetime of being her father, like its own kind of vacation. I want to tell you about one more night, because I think it's the part that actually closed the book, more than Christmas dinner ever did. It was late May. Ellis and Lydia's marriage, it turned out, had been running on something thinner than either of them let on, and once a certain kind of money disappears from a certain kind of life, the cracks that were always there stop being polite about it. Ellis's firm went through layoffs that spring. Montgomery's company, we heard through Rita, who heard it through a cousin of Ellis's, had overextended on 2 buildings right as interest rates turned against him. None of it had a single thing to do with me. I want to be honest about that. I didn't engineer any of it. The world simply stopped being gentle with people who'd never had to ask it to be. Lydia called the apartment at 11 at night. Charlotte answered, because I was asleep, and I woke up to her voice low and careful in the hallway. The kind of careful you use when you're trying not to wake somebody, but also trying not to hang up on your own daughter. I got up. Charlotte covered the receiver. It's Lydia, she said. She's not doing well. I took the phone. Dad. Her voice was wrecked, thin, nothing like the bright performing voice from that Thanksgiving table a year and a half earlier. Dad, I'm sorry to call so late. Ellis and I are upside down on the apartment. His bonus didn't come through, and Montgomery can't help right now. His lawyers have him in some kind of freeze on his accounts, and I didn't know who else to... Lydia, I know where I stand after Christmas. I'm not asking for a place in your estate. I'm not trying to undo anything. I just need even a loan, Dad, anything. I'll pay every cent back, I swear to you. Lydia, I said again, and she stopped. The hallway was dark except for the little light over the stove. Charlotte stood a few feet away, arms crossed, not pulling me one direction or the other, just waiting to see who I was going to be in this exact moment, because we both knew that this was the real test. Christmas dinner had been theater, as righteous as it was. This was the quiet, unglamorous 3 a.m. version, where nobody was watching, and it would have been so easy to be soft. I'm not going to send you money, I said. Dad, please, I'm not trying to. I know what you're trying to do. I believe you that it's not about the inheritance. I believe you'd pay it back. None of that is the point. Then what is the point? I'm your daughter. I'm struggling and you have $68 million sitting in an account. The point, I said, and here's where the short sentences came back, the same way they had at that table, because some sentences only mean something when they're short, is that you taught me what I was worth to you. I believed you. I'm not interested in unlearning that now because it's inconvenient for you. Silence on the line. I could hear her breathing ragged on the other end. You're really going to let me drown over a scratch-off ticket? No, I said. I'm letting you live in the world you built, the same way I lived in it for 34 years without anyone bailing me out of a single hard month. You'll figure it out. You're smart. You've always been smart. You were just never kind, and I waited a very long time to find out that those two things aren't the same. She was crying now, the real kind, not the performance kind. I hate that you're right, and I still don't understand how we got here. I do, I said. I've had a year and a half to think about it. Good night, Lydia. I hung up before she could say anything else. Charlotte didn't say a word. She just put her arms around me in that dark little hallway, and we stood there a long time. I want to tell you I felt triumphant, the way you're supposed to feel in stories like this one. I didn't. I felt clean. Clean is quieter than triumphant, and it lasts a lot longer. She hasn't called since. I don't expect her to. And if she did, I already know what I'd say. because I said it that night and I meant every word of it, and a man my age doesn't get many sentences in his life that he's certain he'll never need to take back. That one I'm certain of. People ask me sometimes, Harrison asks me, mostly, over coffee, in the careful way old friends check on whether you actually meant the enormous thing you did, whether I regret it, whether there's a version of this where I quietly forgive my daughter, fold the money into something gentler, let the door stay open a crack the way families are supposed to. I tell him the truth every time. I don't. Not because the money changed me. Charlotte will tell you I'm exactly as cheap as I was the day I retired, still clipping coupons out of habit, still wearing the same watch I've had for 20 years. The money didn't change a single thing about who I am. What it did was show me, with total clarity, who everyone else already was. Montgomery was always a man who took what wasn't his to need. Ellis was always a man who didn't notice what was happening right in front of him until the math made it impossible to ignore. Rita was always exactly who she'd always been. Generous without keeping score, the daughter who never once needed a number to know what she was worth to me. And Lydia. Lydia was always a woman deciding, quietly, year after year, dinner after dinner, exactly how much her own father was worth compared to the people she wanted to impress. The lottery ticket didn't create that. It just finally put a number on it, large enough that she couldn't look away from what she'd already decided a long time before I ever scratched a single panel. I gave her 34 years. She gave me $2 in a laugh. I figure we're square. Sitting at that Thanksgiving table with a gas station scratch-off in my shirt pocket, I had no idea I was holding the most expensive lesson my family would ever pay for. I know it now. And some lessons, once they're finally taught, are not the kind that get a second class. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.